Hello and welcome. Oh, I got to do that. Hello, it is How-To Diorama with Scale Modelcraft, and I am Bill. And thank you very much for coming on. Hey, there's some people here. So Paul Christopher came on like 50 minutes ago and said hello. So thanks very much for saying hi, Paul. And then Eric Brubaker's here. Thanks very much, Eric. And Mark is here. Hello. Thanks very much for coming on by. And I want to do kind of not an announcement, but the replay of this is going to be live on Saturday morning. What happens is after I record these, I have to kind of wait a little bit for it to do its stuff and then upload and all that kind of stuff. And I've been trying to do them the same day. And sometimes the quality is not good. So what I'm going to do is the replay will be ready on Saturday mornings. I haven't figured out the time yet, but that's how I'm going to do the replays. John is here. Hey, thanks very much, John, for coming in. I really appreciate it. And then If I Could Paint is here. Hello, they're very much from London. I really appreciate you coming by. If I Could Paint. Today's going to be really fun. I had a great week. And it was like all about sandbags and stuff. The sandbags were awesome. I'm going to swap over here real quick and show you those pictures because what I found was, sandbags, I needed a lot of them, right? And it was important for me to kind of, I did shoring first, but I'm going to go into the sandbags real quick. So I'm going to go forward. We're going to talk about the shoring because it had to happen before that. But the thing that I wanted to talk about was this. The size of the sandbags. The size of the sandbags were not something that I totally got. I have struggled with that because when I was in the military, the size of the sandbag was a lot different. I'm trying to figure out where I should be, so you can see me talking too. Let's do this one. So that's better. In the military, when I was there, a sandbag was about 18 inches long and it was maybe about a foot wide. And they were really portable. You carried a couple in your hands, you threw them, and we used a lot of sandbags, okay? Well, in World War I, this is the dimensions, 14 by 26. And I say approximate because some of the information that I found showed them as even bigger. And, they were stitched and they had all this kind of stuff. And these are pictures that I got from the National Archives. And these pictures are great. They show, what the sandbags look like in World War I. And so I got a bunch of those. Well, I didn't get a bunch of those pictures. There wasn't a heck of a lot on sandbags, but I was able to use those in reference. And those references gave me a heck of a lot of information about how big I should make them and, kind of how they were stacked. I mean, because that's pretty important. If you're looking behind these guys, back up here on the back, this one is it's like 26 inches long. It's super long. And they were like that because they needed to conform to the surface below them so they would stack properly and kind of meld themselves to the surface. They wanted to kind of stick to whatever they were put on, be it other sandbags or the terrain that they were putting them on. So they were kind of not completely filled, and that, made for a kind of it could be a very nice stacking of your sandbags, or it could be a sloppy one. And I chose a little bit sloppy. Hey, Sleazen is here from the UK as well. Hello, Sleazen. Thanks very much for coming in. I really appreciate it. So now that I, completely messed up my little presentation here, I'm going to go all the way to the top, and we're going to look at the first thing I did after last week, which was shoring. And shoring is just trying to keep the sides of this trench together. As you're digging this stuff, the soil may be wet, it might be moist, but as you expose air to it, the soil's going to dry out and it's going to want to collapse in on itself. So you have to put something in there, shoring, to keep it up. And so that's what I concentrated on this week at first. So this is the same balsa wood that we talked about last week. And I even, at the end of this, I have that little formula. Well, it's not really a formula. It's just what I used. And I'm going to show that again. If anybody has any, questions about how to do it. And I can take questions and answer questions and all that kind of stuff about it at the end. But I took that balsa wood and I kind of did a standard. I wanted them to be about 6 feet long in scale. And so that's what I have here. And so I laid out the multiple, this is laid down, but it's the horizontal ones. You see multiple horizontal ones and then one vertical picket. And that was basically the tie-in that held them up. Now there's lots and lots of different ways to do this. There's lots and lots of different ways to create these walls or the shoring to include, corrugated tin. Oh, I'm so sorry. Sleazen came back and said Sleazen is from France. I'm very sorry about that, Sleazen. You are from France, and you told me that, and I messed that up. So I'm very sorry. Thank you very much for saying so, Sleazen. But this, I wanted to use multiple things because they did use multiple things, and I also didn't necessarily want to use the idea of a brand new trench, but one that had been lived in. So there's going to be some brand new and some that's lived in. But you see this here, this is that planking, that shoring, and the vertical ones. I want to put this in, and it looks a little rough, but I'm still going to go back and break it, right? There's some of these that I want to kind of break because if there was a shell that went off in the trench and it kind of broke the board, I want to come back and do that. But before I do that, I do it correctly. I do it like it's new, and then I break it. This is another thing that I did that I really enjoyed. On the outside, I thought, boy, this is awfully tall and it's really sheer. So I wanted to do some pilings. And pilings are a little different because when they're putting these pilings in, they have to be pounded in, right? They didn't necessarily dig a hole to put a post in World War I. What they would do is they would sharpen the bottom of the post and they would hammer the thing in. Sometimes engineers would do it. Sometimes guys with massive sledgehammers were doing it. So I'll show you just a little simple way of doing the pilings like I did. And I've got some tighter pictures of them later on. I also wanted to vary. I didn't want to have the same kind of, even though I'm using this corrugated tin, I didn't want to use that on both sides evenly. I wanted a little bit of something where it showed that, this has gone through some battle. This has gone through some damage. These lines have been repaired. That's the kind of line that I wanted to create. So once I had the shoring done, then it was time to go to the sandbags. And I used the Sculpey Air Dry. Now, here's the slide that I showed before. They're approximately 14 to 26 inches, so they're not filled so they can conform to an uneven surface. They pack to about 8 to 10 inches high. So when you're thinking about putting in your diorama, when you're building a World War I diorama and you're thinking about how these should go in, about 8 to 10 inches. And so you can kind of calculate that. I do it a little bit more looser, and I'll show you how I do it later on because I'm going to show you live how I make all these little sandbags. So here's that one picture I showed you. Here's another where it's like in 1916. This is an old British trench that has been overrun, and so there's a lot of stuff that went on there. And Eric has a question real quick. Is the corrugated metal styrene or lead foil? It's lead foil. Thanks very much for asking that, Eric. So I use this, it's kind of lead foil, and I'm going to grab some and show it to you. I showed this last time, but it's always good to look at this stuff. And let me go ahead and take my picture back. This is what I used. And this is O scale. So it's not exactly scale for 1/35. It's actually smaller. It's actually scaled for like 1/48 would be better. I thought it looked appropriate, so I'm using it. But this is from the railroad industry, and it is aluminum. You have to paint it. Earlier this week, I thought, you know what? I love that solution that I use, the vinegar and steel wool solution. I love that solution, and it works on other things besides, the wood, the balsa wood. So I tried to do a little bit of this. It did nothing. So yeah, so don't waste your time. Just paint it, and that's what I did. I did just standard painting on it with some rusts and some different colors, a little bit of a mottled color. That's the back of it. I wanted to paint both sides, but I think it comes out great. It's real easy to work with. It bends. You can form it. That's what I did. I like it very much. Now, the place I got this was called Builders in Scale. They are out of Mukilteo, Washington. You can look up Builders in Scale online. You may be able to find that they still have stuff. I think they're going through a bit of a retirement, but give them a shot. And I'm sure you can find other places. Other folks have made their own, and it looks great too. And there's rollers. Somebody showed me a roller that you can get for the paper industry. I think it might have been John Robeck. It's a little roller that you roll paper through, but you can use that for corrugated. Maybe it wasn't John. I don't know. Somebody showed me on a live stream I was on, and it was very cool, but I can't remember who did it. Sorry about that. Okay, so let me get this back. Sorry, I'm all over the place. And so back to these guys. Now, one of the other things I just wanted to talk about is when you're looking for reference material, take a look at the National Archives. Now, this is a picture, a view from the front line, and it was in Quentin, France. Here is another picture from the National Archives. This is a trench, basically a gate, an entrance point for the gate. You can see the corrugated tin at the base. That's kind of where I got my idea for putting it at the base. And then here's another one where it's working with carrying duck boards over a support line. So now the thing I think I wanted to say about, the National Archives stuff is a lot of times when I'm looking for information, I'm looking for information online or inspiration that I can utilize not only in reference material for what I'm building, but I also want to maybe put it in a video or put it in something. Well, here's the thing. A lot of the stuff you see online, it first comes up when you look for an image. It'll come from like a stock image place or something like that where there's licensing involved. The stuff at the National Archives is free to use. It is open. Now, there are some things that you might want to look at the licensing. Each image has its own licensing statement, and some of those images may be licensing, but I've checked with the images I use, and you can use those both in video and stuff. I couldn't make a poster of it and sell it. There are limitations. But so far as putting it into video, utilizing it, even referencing it, maybe in one of my videos about the diorama that I'm doing, totally cool. So look at the National Archives. You can join. You don't have to join. It's free, and you can get images there. And just, I don't know if it's billions, but there's millions of images on there, and really great images too. So take a look at the National Archives and just type in National Archives, it comes up. So when I started then, after looking at my reference photos and stuff like that, I did also get some questions from folks saying, hey, those are some awfully deep trenches that you're doing. And yes, they are. But look at this image. If you see the gentleman's right hand, he is standing below that. So just above waist high is one of the standing platforms that you utilize to see over and fire over the actual rim of the trench. Well, the trench floor is, you can tell quite a bit further below that. That's the kind of trench I'm doing. And so as we look at the images that I've got of my trench, you can see that it's pretty deep, but you see where the gentleman is standing up in the right-hand corner upon one of those. Now, I've got wood there. There is going to be sandbags on there, and, other material, dirt, mud, all that kind of stuff later on. But yeah, some of the trenches were quite deep. They were definitely over your head. You did not want to be walking along and then there's a high point in the trench, or you're above, you just get picked off, and people on the other side of the line would recognize that pretty quickly, and you would become a target, and they would just literally look at that low spot, and anytime they'd see a helmet, ding, and they would take somebody out. So you got to be really careful. And certainly you do have deep trenches. They weren't all just the ones up to your waist like you saw in maybe some old movies. They were quite deep. So laying in these sandbags, if you'll notice, and I'm going to go a couple of pictures back. What I started with were just these over the doorway, kind of the entrance from the main area, the entrance to the trench. And there were entrances like this. I quantified that as well. And these entrances, basically, I figured that's a great place to start just to kind of get the feel of the size, because remember, the size of these is bigger than I originally thought. So I started laying in here, then I went to the inside, and then eventually I got to laying it along the ground. When I'm laying these out, and I'm going to show you that in the live demo here later on, what I'm doing is I'm trying to lay them out in rows, but not necessarily very even rows, because what happened was, people are living and stepping and working around them and moving stuff, and something gets thrown out, and so you got to put another one in, or I should say a sandbag gets worn out and then you got to replace it. So the sandbags that I saw when I was in and how people stacked and stuff like that was different than some of the images I've seen. I've seen images online of actual trenches where they are just lined up like bookshelves, and the sandbags are perfectly lined up, and they're not even stacked like bricks, so that they're uneven, but they're literally in columns and rows. It could be like a spreadsheet. But there were also ones that are like mine where they are kind of haphazard. And so that's what I wanted. I wanted a little bit of a haphazard. I wanted a lived-in look. I wanted it to look like it had been done over time and then redone because things had gotten worn out. Now I've got another little thing in here, and there's a step. You see that there's a steep little slope there coming from the trench, so it goes to a deeper part. That's going to have some very, very specialized steps that I have to put in there a little bit later on as well. But on the sides of it, I had to build up my sandbags so that I could reach the level. And when you're laying these sandbags, think of gravity. These things are heavy. They're full of sand. If a round goes off and the ground shakes, they will shift. And so think about gravity always wanting to pull these sandbags down. Keep that in your mind when you're laying sandbags. Gravity is continuously going to want to pull these things down. If you're walking through this trench and there's no room to walk, you're going to move out of the way maybe, and you're going to walk along these sandbags. They're going to slip. They're going to move. There's mud everywhere. So, a little bit of a haphazardness isn't a bad thing. Now here, I also want to talk about a little detail on the sandbag itself. So early on, I showed this picture. Here's a zoomed in point of this picture. And I want you to look on the left-hand side. Do you see that gathered seam around those sandbags? It's kind of a hemmed up, rolled up seam. They look to be hand stitched. I don't know, but it looks to be. It could have been a machine that did it back then. But these things were like pre-made and they had a seam there. Well, I'm trying to capture that seam here on these sandbags. And I saw another gentleman earlier this week. His name is Neil Bullard. Wow, I'm telling you folks, this gentleman really knows how to do like detail. Okay. Now he does a different scale. He does like, I think a 1/12 or 1/6 or something like that. You know, they're much bigger, 1/48 maybe. But I think, oh, wait a minute. I think I remember it's 1/16. I think that's the scale that he works in. But I've seen some of his images. Number one of a cabin. He's working on one right now, and it looks like it's a trench. It's a World War I trench, and his sandbags look just like the ones in this picture. He purchased them. He didn't make it himself. They're handmade though, and they look just like that. They're much bigger than these 1/35th scale that I'm doing. But I wanted to make that distinction because what I'm trying to do here is not make the seam. What I'm trying to do here is add a shadow line. And that's a very distinct difference than trying to do a fully stitched seam. Because I tried it on a couple of these and it didn't work out. If I did them one by one, yeah, it would probably work out. But I have to do these, and you'll see how I do them later on, a little bit more expeditiously than that. And because of that, I don't think I could make that seam. So rather than a seam, that hand stitched seam that you saw in there, like Eric says, yeah, it does look hand stitched, doesn't it? Rather than that, in this scale, I'm just trying to get a shadow line. And I think the shadow line is effective. And what I mean by effective is it tells your eye that there's a seam there, but you're not seeing the seam. You're not looking at that hand looped, hand stitched seam on that sandbag, but there's an impression of it. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to trick your eye a little bit, frankly, because I believe that's the best way to show it here. If I did do each one of these, like, in the picture here, yeah, gosh, I'd still be on the first course. So, that I did make that change. And, you decide if you want to do the full hand stitch kind of a thingy, and that's okay. I'm going to stick with these. Okay. So now let's look at some more of these because there's some more stuff to consider here. If you'll notice my sandbags, if you do a newer style sandbag, and if any of you, unfortunately, have ever had flooding in your area, you've had to do some sandbags possibly. Sandbags, today, we gather the top of it and we tie it off around it. And so there's a dimpling at one end. It's square at one end. The other side is kind of dimpled. And it comes down to a point where it's tied off. And then there's the top of it. It's very different than the World War I sandbags. The World War I sandbags, from all I can tell, that looks like that they were manufactured prior. I'm not saying they weren't filling them in the trenches. I'm saying that there was a point where there was no tie off. It was sewn shut. So a lot of these were manufactured offsite, brought in, and then placed. So that's why they look like pillows, a lot of them. They're just rectangular. They're not like you see a sandbag today. So if you're doing sandbags both in World War II and like nowadays, it's not going to look like a World War I sandbag. They're also smaller today. They're not the size. They're also made out of a nylon material, not burlap, like the World War I sandbag. So just make those considerations, when you're trying to model this. And you can see the reference materials and you can see how they look. I think that little shadow line there is going to work for a seam. I hope so. I think they're looking pretty good. Okay. So, as I did that, I did the inside of one, and how I accomplished that was with this thin plastic. So this is like saran wrap or plastic wrap that you use in the kitchen. And I did want the sandbags to stick to the walls. I wanted some adherence there, but I didn't want the sandbags to stick to the ground. So I just put some of this plastic wrap down. It's super thin, so I'm not going to lose any detail. I kind of fixed it down, and then I put down my wall there. I taped it so it wouldn't shift, and then I laid in all of my sandbags. Once it's dry now, I can lift this whole wall assembly off, and it just works great. So I can't do the one that we were just looking at, But here's the other wall assembly, the one that I did first. And, you know, it's perfectly flat on the bottom. There's the bottom of those sandbags. And because it's on plastic, once it had dried overnight, I did want to take this and let it sit kind of like this, because the plastic kind of prevented the bottom of the sandbags from drying. So, you know, after they drew overnight on the plastic, I took it off and I just let it sit like this for a day. Now, after a day, there's still a little bit of spring to them. So these things have to dry for multiple days. But I mean, you can work with them at this point. They're nice and sturdy. They're not going to come off there. You don't want to be rough with them, but they work pretty darn good, and they're going to stay there. They're not coming off. Okay. I have done them in the past where they do come off. I don't, I put that plastic wrap down for the entire surface that these will be on. And then when they dry, you just take the whole thing off. And I have to say, it's really easy to paint that way. And once it's done, you just put it back and you just glue it in. I don't know why I did it different this way, because I didn't do it that, or because I didn't do it this way last time. That's why I did it this way. And I'm going to show you how I did it too, like in videos, not today, but when I show you how to do those, I'll explain it. Well, yeah, I can show you how to do it. I'm sorry, I'm just being wonky. Because I just wanted to stay with each wall, because I have two walls. Here's the other one back here. Again, I just wanted to leave it on there because it was yesterday when I finished it up, and I didn't want to take that off. So it's still drying, but once it's done, it'll come off just like this wall. Makes it real easy to work with, real easy to paint. Okay, where are we at? I am keeping this. So that saran wrap or plastic wrap, I don't want to use the name if I don't want to. It'll also hold a little bit of water, but don't worry about that. The water is important because if these dry out too quickly, this is kind of a down side of using this Sculpey air dry clay. If it is very warm, like it's been around here lately, it's been in the 90s here. If it's very warm in your shop, you can get cracking on these because the outside will dry faster than the inside. And so it'll kind of contract and shrink. There's a little bit of shrinkage on these. You see those gaps when I put them together, the gaps in the upper left here. There was no gaps there when I put them together. So they are shrinking a little bit. I remedied that, and there will be more courses on top of these. I just frankly ran out of putty. I only have enough putty today to show you the demonstration about how to do it, but there is a little bit of shrinking. So the last course I put on here, I'll show you what I did. I just did a lot more overlapping, as you can see here. But they will shrink a little bit. I think the trade-off of that little bit of shrinkage for me is okay, because the other one that I've used, or the other style of clay that I've used, is milliput. And milliput is wonderful. I mean, it's great. I don't believe there's any shrinkage. They dry, rock hard. They sculpt just as easy as the air dry clay here does. But the milliput is magnitudes more expensive for a small bit of the milliput. And albeit it is an epoxy, so yeah, it's more expensive. I don't have a problem with that. But it's so much more expensive if you're doing this many sandbags. I think it might be cost prohibitive. Because I want a lot of sandbags on here, and there's going to be a lot more. I'm nowhere near the end of the sandbags. Some of these are going to go quite high on the wall, as well as later on, I'm going subterranean. I'm going into tunnels. I'm doing sappers. That's probably next week I start. So that's the kind of thing that I think about. There has to be some economy in this because of the volume that I'm doing. So now a couple of shots looking down the trench. This is the thing that I talked about the very first time when I was showing blocking in. If anybody remembers blocking in, I had this really pretty good wide trench. I should have brought a picture. That would have been smart, but it was very wide. Well, I said, look, once we get all this stuff in, it's going to really narrow that trench. So I'm only going to have one duck board in some of these places, like right in the middle there. Only one duck board can fit in there. So you can't have multiple duck boards or duck boards side by side like you can in some of the other places, which is common. That happened. But there are places where you only got one duck board. And so that is why I wanted it, when blocking it in, I got a pretty large and wide trench. And then as I built it up, I just kind of encroach in. Now there's going to be more encroachment because once I get more of these in here, I'm also going to be putting mud, and then the mud is going to add a layer of detail, but also it's going to make it feel a lot more close in. So that's the kind of things that you kind of want to consider in putting these in. I could do something where they're not going to shrink and maybe they're not going to crack, and by cracking, I mean it's small. It's just little tiny cracks in the sides of these sandbags. You can't really tell, but because I'm doing so many, I think that's important. Okay, so now this is one of the things I wanted to talk about. This is one of the things I wanted to show you, because these pilings, to get the right look of the piling, and here are some that I've done that I didn't use yet, and I don't know if I will, but that piling, see the top of that piling, it's been like hammered, right? So it's all splayed and frayed and stuff like that. Well, it's not hard to do, but I figured I'd show you how I do it. So let's do this. I am going to go for the top down, and this is the hammer that I use for making these look like they've been hammered. I start with some dowel. This has got to be 3/16. It's not quarter. I'd say it's 3/16. And when I'm cutting dowel, I mean, you can cut it any way you like it, but I'm going to suggest you do it like this. When I cut dowel, I want a piece about the same size as that. So I'll put my X-Acto knife on there and then I'll roll it. Okay. And so I'm just rolling it and I'm scoring it. And then I can go a little bit harder, and you can follow the line once you get it all the way around, and then go kind of hard, but keep rolling. Don't try to push it through. And then when you've got a good score in there, then you just pop it off. Now, what that does is it gives you a really clean break, and you don't have splintering off the sides of your dowel. But I kind of want that here. Well, I do want it, but I only want it on the top. And so this is what I do. Now, this has got two sides on it, so you'll have to find something that's comparable to you. I don't want this side. You see, it's kind of, get it sharp there. It's kind of sharp, but it's not. It's blunt here, okay? And then it's a regular like hammer there. It's just like a jeweler's hammer or something like that. Well, I'm using this side to just hammer it. And I'm going pretty hard, but what that does is it doesn't completely destroy it. And because it doesn't, it's not the big head. If I'm doing it with the big head, it just wants to drive the thing down. Because it's the small head and I'm kind of hitting it off on these angles, and there's a smaller bit hitting it than this big hit, you see what it did? It just splayed that out really nice. Let's see if I can get that to focus a little better. It splayed that out very nicely. You do it on the back of my hand. And so that looks like a piling that has been hammered in. And again, that's what I was trying to do when I was doing these pilings, where I got some pilings somewhere. I got to switch the camera. Those pilings there. That's what I wanted. I wanted something that looked like it was hammered in. You either had like a pile driver, like you had, engineers would do today, or it's just dudes with big sledges hammering these things into the ground, because that's, there was a lot of manual work back in World War I. So that is how I do mine. Now, I did not, to get the color on these, I did not use my vinegar and steel wool solution. I just used regular brown, dark brown wash, the Tamiya wash. It's like an enamel wash, and then did a little bit of black because I wanted something that looked sort of like creosote, you know, like a telephone pole. I wanted something that looked like it'd been coated with something to keep it from rotting. So that's what I did for my pilings, and I think they came out great. So the next thing, I got to go to a different camera. Sorry. So the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to show you how I make my sandbags. And there's a couple of tools that I use to do sandbags, but nothing crazy and nothing that you can't find. The kind of stuff I use, which I've talked about quite a bit, is the Sculpey Air Dry. Now, the cool thing about this stuff is it dries in the air. You don't got to bake it. And it lasts for a really good long time. I've had mine in just its original package. And like I said, I'm out. So I'm sorry, I don't have the original package. But it's just the regular Sculpey Air Dry. It's not the new formula. It's not the porcelain. It's white. That's it. They've got terracotta. I think they've even got black sometimes, but I just use the white. And it works great. When I take this stuff and start working with it, I think it has maybe some plaster in it or something like that. So it's going to get on your fingers. No big deal. A little bit of water comes right off. So now I'm going to go to switch to my top-down camera. That's not it. There we go. And I'm going to take off, I don't know. Do you know, does anybody remember when mice, like this mouse, had balls in the bottom of them? They had a mouse ball in the bottom where before they started using an optical sensor. Well, that's about the size of a mouse ball. That's the closest thing I can call it. It is about an inch diameter, maybe a little bit under an inch. Okay. So I want to roll it around like that because I don't want to have any voids in it. That's just one of the things that can happen if you don't. So roll it around a little bit and then start making a little worm. Okay. Now I like to use a piece of glass. You don't have to use a piece of glass. You can use whatever you like, but the glass has some, I mean, plexiglass will work great as long as it's a little bit thicker so it doesn't bend. But what it does is it allows me to roll and see how big it's getting. And I'm going to want this to be just about a 1/4 inch round. And you see the neat thing with the glass is I can just kind of see how it's doing as I'm rolling. And that's about a 1/4 inch. Now, one of the things that I do is I'll put my knife next to it to just kind of get a fair reference. It is smaller than the knife. I don't want it as big as the knife. So it is smaller than that. So once I get that, then I take a piece of muslin. This is just a lightweight muslin, and it serves two purposes. The first thing that I thought was I want to get the fabric impression on there. Well, it does okay, but it kind of loses it. But what it does do, it allows me to get on here and flatten this stuff out and see it flat. It'll stick to the glass if I try to just push down, but with the muslin on there, it doesn't. And you'll notice here, you can see through the muslin. It's light enough that when I'm pushing down, you can see it get wider. You just saw that, right? It just gets a little bit wider, so you can kind of gauge how wide it is and make sure everything is the same. You pull it off and there you go. So now I rolled it, I flattened it out, used the muslin, got a little bit of shape to it. Now I want to, and this is when it's warm, I want to take a little bit of water and I'm just going to paint one deal right on there. That's it. I'm not going to wet the thing down. This stuff will get gooey if you put too much water on it. But what I'm doing is I'm trying to keep this thing so that it doesn't dry out too fast and it won't crack. So this really helps by doing this, okay? The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wet the surface. I'm going to put it right on here. I'm going to wet the surface that I'm going to be placing it on. This is water soluble, so by wetting the surface, it's going to help it stick. It's going to help it stick to the old ones that are already dry and the wall here, this surface here. So it'll help it stick to that. Okay. So I'm just kind of painting that real gingerly. Now, I let it sit for a little bit. Nothing wrong with that because it'll absorb that water. And then I'm just kind of going an angle here because it's easier to cut. Now, I use a regular blade, and this clay has a little bit of fiber in it. Okay. So if you're going to cut this, you know, you're thinking, well, clay, heck, I could just use this as a piece of, you know, just chop, chop, chop. Well, it won't, because the fiber in this has to be actually cut. So if you do something like that, regular clay, you're going to have problems. So I want to go in here. I want to put the blade down flat and then just pull back. And there it is. Now I'm just eyeballing it here, but that is the size I want to do. Now, to gauge my size, I actually drew on this piece of wood. I did a scale calculation, and that right there is the size of a World War I sandbag, the outline there. You see how much smaller I'm making mine. And the reason is it just seemed too big. You know, I do want to kind of build to the eye. If you want it to do it that size, absolutely, and you're fully right in doing it that way. But there's two things I consider. Number one, I think that's the flat dimension. So when you fill it with sand, it's going to get a little bit thinner and a little bit shorter. And number two, it didn't look right next to the figures that I use in the diorama. So I did make mine a little smaller than what those dimensions say, the 26 by 14. Okay, so I cut these up, and you can see this part I always have a little bit of a time with. I do want to concentrate because it's weird when you're cutting so many repetitiously. It's easy to do it wrong once. I don't know why. Maybe it's just me. But I cut all these guys up, make sure that they're all ready. It gives time for that water that I painted on the surface I'm going to apply them to. Kind of soaks in a little bit, and you know, it kind of prepares the surface. And then I like to take some flat tweezers and use those, because if you use these kind of tweezers, obviously it's going to make impressions on that. You know, it's going to grip it. So I'm coming in real carefully. I'm not gripping that hard at all. You know, I could, well, I guess it's not going to fall off because it's kind of sticking, but I'm really careful with it, so I don't try to put a lot of impressions on it from the tweezer. And I just come in here and put it in. And that's it. I mean, it's just too simple. The thing that I want to do, though, is I do want to overlap them. And I want to make them like a soldier is putting these in that doesn't necessarily want to do it. That's kind of how I think of this stuff. Excuse me. So when I was in the military, you get jobs, or you get given an assignment, and it may not be the best assignment, but you have to do it. So motivation in the military is not always constant. So there are times, I think, in the military, and I'm not talking about wartime. I'm just talking about my experience in the military, which was not during wartime. You didn't always do stuff exactly the way it was prescribed. You sometimes cut some corners. And I'm not talking about anything that's critical. I'm talking about getting an exact pattern on your sandbags, okay? I'm not talking about engaging the enemy. That is pretty well drilled into you. I'm talking about if you're on a detail and what you're told to do is you got to stack all these things, you're just going to be like, well, all right. And you do it. So that's the kind of look I'm going for. Once I've put these in, I'm not going to do them all right now, but once I've put these in, I'm not quite done, because this material, and I'm not really pushing down on them, but because this material is a little bit tacky, it's going to stick, but it may not stick very well. So I'm going to come back with more water, and that water will seep and wick between the ones that I just put on there, and that will help it stick. So it is important to do that. Now, I told you earlier on that sometimes I want them to stick to this, the material or the base that I'm putting them on. Sometimes I don't want them to. Well, what I did here to help them stick to this, this wood, this corrugated tin, and also the sides, is I took this is a small Tamiya stylus, little carving tool. And I just did this. I come in and just right at the end and just do that. Okay. It's just smushing, and that's the best word I got for you. It's just, I'm trying to refocus so you got a better view. I'm just smushing a little bit of it into the wall, and that's enough. I don't have to, blend it all in, stuff like that. I just need a little tiny bit pressed into the wall, and then I can come back and put something over it so it's not going to be seen. But that really helps these adhere to the surface that I'm putting them on. So now I'm just going to cover those areas up that I did the little smushing. And then I'll show you the last step I do to get that seam in here. Okay, so they've been in there, and when I'm doing this, this, I would probably do one more, series like this. And after about 2 series, it's kind of set up enough that I can come back in and do that little shadow line. And what I use for that little shadow line is this. This is just one of those, tools you can get at the hobby store. But the specifics to this is the round end. It's flat and it's round. And that really helps when I'm doing this next part. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here, and I'm not going to cut or do anything like that. I'm just going to come in here and easily press in just a little bit. I don't have to do a big major thing. I'm just coming in and pressing into it. And again, what I'm doing is I'm creating a shadow line. I'm not doing that full stitched seam. I'm not creating, anything other than that. You could if you wanted. I'm not, because I'm doing so many. If you were doing less, maybe, yeah, it might be effective. Well, I'm sure it would be effective. It's just, time effective. So I just press those in, and that'll hold. It won't come back out. And that then finishes up that course of sandbags. And they're done. That's it. Now, what you see here and the pictures I've shown you, that took a couple of days to do, all of that. It wasn't bad. And I took breaks in between it. Some of this work, because it is so repetitive, if you don't do that, and we've talked about that a few times, you get all bound up. Hey, we got some other people in here. Erdink, thanks very much for coming in. It's great to see you. So yeah, we're talking about sandbags. I don't know if you caught all of that, but these sandbags, if you do too many at one go, especially me, I have back issues and all that kind of stuff, man, I get all cramped up and stuff like that. But it looks so great when you can do something like that, because people do realize, the work that has to go in to do something that's repetitive like that. There were a lot of sandbags. You saw in the reference pictures I gave you, that one British that was an abandoned line. I mean, my goodness, I can't tell you how many thousands of sandbags are in there. Well, I think then to make an effective World War I diorama, you're probably going to have to get a bunch of them in there. And that's why I like this method. I think that this allows you to get just a crud load in there without, number one, breaking the bank and going nuts with it. I had somebody I mean, going nuts because you're just frustrated because it's taking so long. I never entered that point, you know, and that's a good part. Somebody early on said, boy, you're going to be doing a lot of these. Are you going to maybe, like cast them, you know, 3D print them? Yeah, sure you could. I personally though, every single one that I put down, okay, this is just how I do stuff. Every single one that I put down there, I remember when I was in and we were doing sandbags and you're joking and you're talking and you're in pain because it hurts and there's just a lot of work and stuff like that. But I just remember guys throwing sandbags on, and then there's one guy there kind of positioning them, but you're doing it quick. You know, you're getting those sandbags in there. And that's literally what I thought as I'm putting these sandbags in. Guys are just pitching them. Not everyone gets in there correct. Not everyone is perfect, but you're getting them in there. And it was a pretty fun time because, you know, you're doing something really difficult and a bunch of guys together doing something really difficult. Boy, there's jokes. It's okay. It was good. But that's the kind of look that I want to present. And I think you can do that if you use this kind of material or something similar, you know, and get a really good look. Okay. So I got another one here. If I Could Paint says, what was the dimensions you drew on that piece of wood for the sandbag, please? So yeah, you know what I didn't do is I didn't measure it in real dimensions. I did it off of my 1/35th scale ruler. So I will do those calculations for you, and then I'll put them in the notes. So that's a good one if I could paint. Yeah, because basically it's scaled down. The real dimensions are, you know, 26 to 28 inches long, and then 14 inches wide. Now the 14 inches wide was pretty static. That didn't really change in any of the reference information that I looked up, both on forums, on Wikipedia and things like that. The width was consistent. It was the length that was like 26 to 24, sometimes 28, you know. So that's why I went with 26 with mine. But yeah, I think there's a lot of neat information. There's also a World War I forum that utilizes a lot of information from the National Archives for great references and great photography. And these are folks that have studied up on it. Take a look at that too. There's so much information out there. I get a little bit embarrassed if sometimes I haven't gone far enough before I talk to you, you know, because I just take it for granted, you know, that I can't give you that information. So I need to be a little bit better with that. Snap Together saves space by dismantling. Wonder how detailed are Snap Together models if 3D printers make Snap Together models. You know what? I think there are some, John. John Hayes is asking about Snap Together models and, you know, if it saves space. I've done a couple of Snap Together models and they're really quite nice. Very detailed. It just depends on who it is. I can't remember if it was Snap Tide or something like that, but I know Bandai are almost Snap Together models, and they're wonderful. If you haven't tried Bandai, Bandai is the model company. They do a lot of Star Wars stuff. They do a lot of space stuff. They do Gundam. They do some great models. I love Bandai. They're pretty expensive and they're absolutely worth it because the engineering is just phenomenal. You can put a Bandai model together without glue and not tell there's a seam. It's bananas. It's really good stuff. If you haven't gotten a Bandai model, John, I would highly encourage it. They're really great. You are welcome if I could paint. And then, yeah, Eric, Bandai for sure. Yeah, because those are just, I mean, the engineering, okay. I did the Yamato. I was a Star Blazers fan growing up. I loved the Star Blazers. And so the Yamato was the main ship in that show. And it was a spaceship that looked like the Yamato destroyer, you know, the big battleship from World War II. And the story goes that it was raised from the bottom of the Japanese Sea. And so, or the South China Sea, I'm sorry, I don't know where the Yamato was sunk. But anyway, that ship was great. And it's from Bandai. And man, it went together just so awesome. There's seams on it that look like panel lines and like the best panel line you ever saw. It's just amazing. Bandai. Love that stuff. Okay, so there we go. I am going to go back to my slides real quick. Yep, that's my slides. And then here is the balsa wood solution. I wanted to mention that again for folks that maybe didn't see it. The balsa wood that I do is on the right-hand side. So there's your standard little sheet of balsa wood. The stuff on the left has gone through this process where I mix some standard white distilled vinegar with steel wool. It soaks in the vinegar for a couple of days. You pull it out, you strain it. You got to make sure you strain it through cheesecloth. I use like a paint strainer or something like that. Strain it through there, and then you get the solution. You dunk your wood in it, and it turns it this nice patina. Now, if you want a very detailed step-by-step process for that, Ebonizing Wood and Steel Wool with Vinegar by Michael Robbins. It was in a fine woodworking episode, or not episode, but magazine that I subscribe to as a woodworker. And man, I got to tell you, it goes through the whole process. His process will give you this color with your wood, make it jet black. Now, that's not one application, that's many applications, but that solution can do it. So let's see. That's where you can go to find that. The other thing that I think is important is I did some wood longer and I did some wood shorter in the solution. Oh, and we got some folks that are joining us. Scott McLeod is here. I made it. Phone died right as I was trying to get on. Sorry, I missed so much. Oh, that's okay. Hey, Scott, what I was telling folks earlier is I'm now going to take these live streams and they will be published as a regular video on Saturday morning. So tomorrow morning, because it has to do this download and it has to do all this jazz afterwards. And so I get a good image. I was trying to publish it right after and do, here's the replay. But now I'm going to do it on Saturday morning. So you have a replay every Saturday morning right after the live stream. And then it should be a clear image, because that was some of the other stuff that we were trying to get back to, is get a better image. And then Martin is here. Hello, Martin. Thanks very much for coming by. What did you miss? Well, there's been a little bit, just a little bit, but it's mostly been on shoring up wood and also sandbags. Lots of sandbag talk. Here are the dimensions that I had last week for the duck boards. That was another surprise to me. Duck boards were very much smaller than I had thought they would be. And this in feet is almost 6.5 feet long and 1.5 feet wide. That's in basic terms. But this is from the Imperial War Museum. That is a series of 5 different museums in the UK, and really neat stuff. And they've got great diagrams like this. And they say it's cool to be able to download their stuff too. So you can download some of their pictures. And then that is the picture of a real duck board. There are 16 slats on that. And as our friend John Robeck showed us in a diagram that I sent out earlier, because I found the same stuff and I published it, the long boards underneath are tapered so that when you put 2 duck boards together, they kind of fit together. Okay, so when I was first making duck boards, I'm like, yeah, duck board, no big deal. I'm trying to find one here because the first ones I made were like this. So I made my duck board, and it's basically like a ladder, and it's just got the stuff on top. Okay, fine. Right length, proper width. But Mr. Robeck found some really cool documentation that showed that the 2, and might be hard to see, but those two long boards, the top ones, they're tapered. And it's very cool because When they're tapered, what that allows you to do is take two of these, so the tapered side goes into the non-tapered side and they lock together. How cool is that? Thank you very much, John Robeck. That was really cool. So your research really helps out stuff. So I didn't find this stuff out. I did my whole other diorama without knowing the proper dimensions. Now, my previous World War I diorama, they're very close to this, but they're not. And they also had duck boards in World War II. There were times because it was just muddy, you know, in a position, and they were bigger. They were almost like walkways. So yeah, big differences in World War I and World War II as you're putting your details in your diorama. Double check that stuff. I had to, and found out some really cool stuff. Okay. Scott McLeod, outstanding. Thank you, Scott. And then John says, doing Asian themed battle, then flick a switch and a mirror effect showing the undersurface revealing terracotta warriors. Oh, I love that idea, John. That's a very cool idea. I love the idea, the terracotta warriors and stuff like that. That would be kind of cool. There's a friend of mine that does a lot of different battles, historic battles, and he bases his on historic, you know, action, stuff like that in 70-second scale, but they're massive. They are massive battlefields that he does. And like some of the old, like Agincourt, you know, you would see that everybody lined up. Well, his are pretty big like that. And he does a lot of that kind of stuff. And I wonder if he's ever thought about that. He would be perfect with that. I'm going to talk to him about that, John. And if you guys are interested, I'm going to put some links because I talked about Neil Bullard. I've not talked to that gentleman about mentioning his name. I probably should have done that. Well, he wouldn't be watching this. But Mr. Bullard, if I want to get some information out to him or for you to his site, because like I said, I looked at his stuff. It looked real. Stunning. Absolutely stunning. I'm not doing a caricature. I wouldn't go that far. And John, thank you very much, John. I'm not going that far in what I'm building so far as realism. But I want to get there. I kind of look at my dioramas as a diorama. When I was a kid, you know, I would go to museums and I was absolutely enthralled with the dioramas, and I knew it was a diorama. It didn't look real. It looked like a diorama, but it portrayed an event. That's kind of what I'm doing. But I want to get toward more what Mr. Bullard does because, wow, it's just, I look real. And it's a different scale, but I still think it's able to do it. Sorry, I need to go back and come back sometime. Do you know how many figures you will put on your trench dial? That's a great question. I don't know, but I want a bunch. So that's the other thing. Sleazen's got a great question there. This morning, I cut more pieces for under the diorama. So I had 2 of these, and then I just added 2 more. And the reason is I am really fascinated, as everybody can guess if you've seen my other stuff, I'm really fascinated with underground. And I want to go underground with this diorama. So there's going to be sappers. And I went back and watched Underneath Hill 60. I've been saying Hill 61. No, it's the movie's name is Underneath Hill 60. And it's about the Anzacs digging trenches in World War I. It's a very gripping movie, and there's some really nice stuff, but it shows that underground difficulty and what people went through. And I think that's highly intriguing. And so that is going to have a heck of a lot of underground. And so that's what's coming up. And this week, I'm going to start doing that design. I'm going to figure out what I'm actually going to have underground and how I'm going to present it. I also have to think about lighting and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be a really fun week coming up, and that'll start basically as soon as we're done here. You know, I like to do that each week. As soon as I'm done with the live stream, I kind of start working toward the next week. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about it. And I think that underground stuff is going to make a lot of difference. John Hayes, never heard of that. I know it wasn't from one mold. Boy, John, I'm not. Wait a minute. Oh, here we go. I think some terracotta warriors had actual bodies in them. Go model that. Oh, yeah, I'm not sure, Martin. I'm not sure if they had bodies in them. It's possible. But yeah, I do know that they were all individually done, which was pretty remarkable. They were all individual faces and stuff like that. Pretty neat. Eric says, look out. Can you say subterranean? Can't wait. Rubs hands together. Yeah. And the subterranean stuff for me is just so fun, and the reason is I can light it, and putting lighting in there and casting those shadows, I just think it's going to be a lot of fun. And so, yeah, I'm super excited, just like Eric said, to go underneath subterranean. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks very much. Awesome. Thanks, John. And John has been really, really good about helping with some of the stuff too. So John Robeck has been part of it. And there's a picture I want to show that John did earlier. Vietnam would be cool, showing above ground, underground tunnels on both sides. See, here's the thing, John, that's really true. I have been wanting to do a 113 because I had 113s when I was in the military. So an M113 and some tunnels in Vietnam. There was a lot of stuff and a lot of tunneling and a lot of complexes and massive complexes underground. There were in World War II as well. But I'd love to do a Vietnam era one because of the traps and everything. Oh, goodness. Yeah. Very, very cool. Paul. Hello, Paul. Thanks for coming in. Hi, Bill. Greetings from Ireland. Thanks very much for coming in. Do you find Sculpey shrinks much? Yes. I've tried some generic kids air dry clay from Amazon and it shrinks a lot. Perhaps a quality price issue. Thanks very much, Paul. And very good point. Yeah, I do think it shrinks. And like when I can't get that off of there, but when I did some of these, maybe you can see it here. When I did some of these, gosh, it's going to be better if I go back to a picture. So let me do that real quickly, please. When I put some of these together, that's not what I'm just confused. I am a highly confused individual at times. Here we go. There we go. Now I am going to try to get back to a picture of these so I can show some shrinking. Here we go. This will work just fine. There we go. So here, Paul, to answer your question, when I put these together, and some of them you should be able to see are this way, they were touching. So the two ends were touching. So kind of down in here, like right here, you can kind of see that separation between the two. Can you see where my mouse is? That's from shrinkage. So there's a fair amount of shrinkage. I don't know what the percentage is, and it wouldn't be hard to figure it out. Put one down, draw a circle around it, let it dry, done. But yeah, there's definitely some shrinkage. I'm not too concerned about it because when I'm done detailing them, there's going to be a lot of mud over them. But if I were going to show them clean and stuff like that, I think it might be worth using milliput. Milliput is the other one that I spoke about. And if you don't know milliput, I'm going to show you some. And I haven't bought any in a little while, but I know the last time I bought it, which was a couple of years ago. Wrong camera. Sorry, folks. I don't even know what I'm doing. Ha! There it is. That's me. This is milliput, and it's a two-part epoxy. There's two pieces of epoxy. You cut them to the same length. You mix them together to get a consistent color, and they work great. They have a much smoother surface than the air dry clay that I use, and there's no cracking. But this, when I bought it, was $14. Okay, that's 2 years ago. I imagine it's more now. I don't know. It is fantastic stuff, but it's super expensive for me. Some other people, it's maybe not expensive. For me, it's expensive. So that's why, cost effectiveness is one of the reasons I use this. And because they'll be seen, they'll be representative, but there'll be a lot of mud over them. So I think it's not going to be a big deal for me. Like I say, if you're going to have them front and center and they're going to be like a major part, I would probably go with milli put, you know. So really good point, Paul. Thanks very much for saying it. How long would it take to finish the diorama build? Well, boy, this is going to be a wild one, Erdink, but I got to say this. I think I'm going faster than on previous ones. I know this last week was super fast. I think this one, I want to see if I can do it in 3 months. The last one I did was 4 months. I'm going to see if I can do this in 3 months. No, the last one I did was 5 months. Maybe I can do this in 3 months. I don't know, but I'm really liking it. And it's the same size as my last World War I diorama. I just wanted the same footprint for some reason. But it's going to be much deeper, you know, that underground stuff. But I'm super excited about it. Martin says 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne could provide some nice underground themes. Absolutely. I love that. And, you know, Martin, that's one of my very favorite movies of all times. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. The movie was made in 1954 by Disney. And I love it. I've got the poster right on my wall up here. Love that movie. And I've done some things, but I really should do something like that based on that. Because one of the things one of my absolute favorite of the monster movie Monsters was The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And I love the fact that there was a grotto where he went underwater and then up into this cave thing. I love the idea of that. So we used to do that in a pool when I was a little kid, and it was a lot of fun. But anyway, yeah, those are great ideas and love the movie. Have you done horror themed diorama? Yeah, I want to do a little bit more of one. I did one previously based on an old Aurora kit. And it was a really fun one. And I'd love to highlight that someday. I don't have it with me now. It's at my friend Tom's house. I did it for him. But I'd like to show you pictures of it because it was really fun. And it's more of just a display, but I did some fun stuff to it. So that's one that I really want to highlight sometime. Thanks very much, John. And I do like horror movies. I like the older horror movies. I'm not much into the Saw and stuff like that. It's just not my thing. But the old horror movies I love. Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman. One of my top movies of all time is Young Frankenstein, the comedy. Absolutely love that movie because of the genre it's about and a lot of other factors because it's hilarious. But yeah, so that's kind of a lot of fun. And I would like to do like a scary one, but more of an old-timey scary one, not like a new, really hyper gore, grim dark thing. I think that stuff, it's a little bit much for me, you know. But yeah, I like that. Near Toronto, Ontario, Canada, the Lancaster bomber was built by all women during the war. They called it the Lanky. That's wonderful. That's really, really cool. And I saw a lot of that. My grandmother during the war worked in the shipyards in Los Angeles. And yeah, boy, that was a heck of a time, and everybody helped, absolutely everybody. I have milli put fine, but nice, but very oily. I need talcum powder to make it workable. Yeah, absolutely, Martin, because it sticks to everything: your tools, the bench, your fingers. A little bit of water works too, but the talcum is fine too, and the talcum doesn't hurt the finish or anything like that. So it works really good. And Paul says, thanks for answer, Bill. We'll check out Milliput. Yeah. And, you know, like Martin says, it's a little bit oily. It doesn't dry that way. And on my first World War I diorama, that's what I used. I used all Milliput. And like I said, it was pretty expensive. It went a long way and it works wonderfully, but it is much more expensive. Okay. But it makes a beautiful, beautiful sandbag. Okay, so those are all our questions. I am going to go back to my slides here real quick if I can figure it out. We'll do that, and then there's that. And I want to show you some other stuff I done. There's the Balsa Wood solution. And there's the dimensions. And then this is not something I did, but this is something that John Robeck did. So this is really, really cool. I'm still working on videos for Emma, Carlos, and Ichiro. So if any of you have seen that, my sincerest apologies. I am still working on videos. As a matter of fact, I just posted a 30-minute video of my latest edit, the rough cut of my latest edit of Emma, Carlos, and Ichiro. And so it's getting close. And I'm so sorry that it's taken so long for me, to get this thing finished. It's just, editing is hard. So, but what I have here is, this is one of the placards. This is not the writing that's going to be in it, but the top image John Robeck created. And that is Emma. That is Emma after the crash site. And she's putting together the first of the 4 geodesic domes that she'll eventually put together. And John did this using Chat GPT and different AI engines. And it's just wonderful. I absolutely love this image. And this is what it's going to look like for the write-ups that are going to go on the sides and the front of the diorama, of the Emma, Carlos, and Ichiro diorama. So this is what they're going to look like. I just need to do my job. John's done this wonderfully. Thank you, John. And I really do like it. It's just so neat looking. And it's kind of got a little bit of a 70s gig to it, which is what I really wanted. And so I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. And then that's okay. So I also wanted to try and show you, because there's 2 videos I'm working on. I'm working on videos for Emma, Carlos, and Ichiro, I just told you about. And there's multiple videos still coming from that build. It's just I'm trying to go in depth and show you how I built everything. We talked about stuff on the live streams, but it's something that much more in depth. The other video that I'm working on is of a friend of mine, Mr. John Harrison. And John Harrison is somebody that I met online a couple of years ago. And when I was trying to figure out how to best in my dioramas show emotion, right? That's something I've been talking about for a long time, right? Well, in learning that, in trying to find out how to do it, I discovered John Harrison. And John Harrison makes these, they're like one-shot dioramas. He'll put the diorama together. They're very, very simple. He'll take a picture of it, and then he takes it all apart, and then they just go in a bin for his next creation. Now, he puts a lot of work into them. Don't get me wrong. He'll paint backgrounds, and he sets up dioramas, and he builds sets and everything, but it's for one shot, and they're not permanent. And they're wonderful. And like I said, the thing that I really got from John is, I talked to you a lot about trying to get a story and emotion and how you place your figures in your diorama and how everything's set up and composition, right? Well, I get there after about a paragraph, if you will. John can get you to that emotional point in a second. And that's very key. When you look at one of John's images, and that's what we're going to highlight in this video that I'm editing, because I did a conversation with John. It was like 2 hours and 45 minutes. It was brilliant. And we just talk about, it's a conversation about doing dioramas and putting emotion in, and how and why and what he uses to do it and what his images show. It's a really neat deconstructive view of his ideas and his inspirations and what he puts into it. And I think you're going to really enjoy it. I hope you're going to enjoy it. It's going to be a longer video. It's going to be cut into 2 sections. It's not going to be 2 hours and 45 minutes full. It's going to be less than that, but probably 2 videos. And I'm really having a great time doing it. And it's just a couple of guys talking over some images, but what is said, I think is worthwhile. So I'm working on that. And I wanted to show you a little intro I did to it because I thought it was really fun. And so I'm going to try to bring that up and and play that. It's like 9 seconds, so it's like not a big deal, but I thought it was really fun, and I just wanted to show it to you. So here we go. I'm going to try to do this, and tell me if you guys can see this properly. Okay, so I hope that wasn't lame. I thought it was really fun. It's just a little intro for the thing that I'm doing for John. And it showed some of his images, and it was really quick, so you can't really tell anything about it. But I was really happy with it. And that video is coming along, and I'm going to be so thrilled to be able to share it with you. I hope you like it. It is a conversation. It's not typically what I do. It's just a couple of guys talking about dioramas, but I think the inspiration is very well expressed from John. You know, where this stuff comes from, and how he kind of started doing this, and how you can do it too. Because trying to add emotion to a diorama, something that's going to engage people, is really important. You know, the nationals, the IPMS nationals are going on this week in Texas, in San Marcos, Texas. And I can tell you from what I'm seeing, some of the feedback, some people up with boots on the ground there, what they're saying is, yeah, they're seeing people talk about stories and talking about emotion. Martin Drayton, I like to call him a friend because we've become friends online, but we've never met. Boy, what a remarkable diorama builder. He did a seminar, a very nice seminar that I'm in the process of watching, and fantastic stuff there. So that's about all I got for this week. I want to make, or this week, I want to make sure I don't miss any comments. Milliput got that. Perfect. Thanks. Thank you very much, Paul. I like Nara air dry clay. It does not shrink as much as suit and is super cheap. Ah, very cool. One that I looked at was DOS. It's also cheaper. It's not, I mean, it's about $4 or $5 cheaper than the stuff that I use, but people said that Sculpey was better. So I'd like to check out Nara and see, you know, how it works. Black and white Young Frankenstein diamond would be incredible. Yeah, love Young Frankenstein. Boy, wouldn't that be awesome? They use the same stuff from the original Frankenstein too. The stuff in the lab, that was from the original diorama, or the original movie, I should say, the black and white movie. Beautiful work, John. He did do great on that, didn't he? I've seen ages ago a shop filled with pewter figures, expensive and amazing. Absolutely. Those little pewter figures are pretty nice. The ones, well, some of them were lead. I think they use kind of a white metal, which is an alloy these days, but some of those older figures were lead. And of course that was, you know, very bad. I don't know how much those things are these days, but there are places you can get them online. They're not cheap. I use Stable Diffusion AI and Photoshop generated fill. Thanks, Martin. There you go. I had a lot of questions when John was doing this because we were online doing it together. Man, he just whipped through that. It was pretty impressive. Very, very nice stuff, John. Have you done Escape Room? Feels like a living diorama or theater play. Yeah, I've never done it. I have friends that have done it. I don't know that I have the patience for that, something like that. I think, you know, I'm the kind of person that will watch a new series on TV and I'll love it. It's the best series ever. And then season 2 comes, I'm like, nah, I've already done it. I get bored too quickly. And I think in Escape Room, I would get bored very quickly. Very nice. There you go. Gotta go. Phone's dying again. Next time, guys. Thanks. Thank you very much for coming in, Scott. I really do appreciate it, Sewell. Sir, very much. If I could paint, yes, very cool. Cool intro. Can't wait to see that conversation. Thank you very much, John. I thought it was super cool, guys. It's just 9 seconds, but it was fun putting it together, and I'm really excited about that. Color effect motion. Colors affect emotions. Absolutely. Colors greatly affect emotions. And so when you're doing like filters and colors and putting something over your light and doing that, and John does this, we'll go over that in this conversation with John Harrison. I think you're going to really like it. Well, thank you very much, folks. I want to get to my Patreon page because that's pretty important. The Patreon folks that have followed me are super important. They're really really nice. We get together and we talk about stuff, and we also do some building. So I think I closed it. So I got nothing to show you. But if you haven't seen my Patreon, please go take a look at it. I think it'd be a lot of fun. And then remember, after this is done, it will shut down. I will wait because it has to do its download thing. And then tomorrow morning, Saturday morning, this will be up again for the replay. So thank you very much, everybody. I had a wonderful time. Thank you very, very much for coming in. I really enjoyed it. And if you get a chance this weekend, get some model building done.